We begin the current Daf in Mesech Rosh Hashanah Daf Ches. We begin 5 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where we continue the halacha of our Mishnah, which again we're discussing as the topic of this parak is Abi Rosh Hashanah. We're talking about 4 Rosh Hashanahs, and we're going to continue with one of the different items mentioned in the Mishnah as being as Rosh Hashanah. Shiur corresponds because in the Cheskot and Dafachem Shem joining us with today's Daf. Something discussed in today's Daf are the sources of the machlekes to know whether Rosh Chodesh El or Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema. And regarding Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Shanam, which is one of the other items mentioned in the Mishnah, we call it Shanam. The Gemara doesn't qualify exactly what does Shanam mean. Some of the important terms and concepts discussed in today's Daf are Ma'aseh Behema, which is every 10th animal from the new animals that are born that year, you have to make it as a carbon the Ma'aseh Behema. Ma'aseh Dagan is that when a person has a grain from that year, he goes and he takes a tithe, and Hekesh, which actually we compare those Maisris of Ma'aseh Behema, Ma'aseh Dagan. Hekesh is when you have two concepts that are mentioned in the same pasuk, the pasuk compares them for all halachic purposes. Petition number Olam is the halachic machlekes regarding when was the world created. Was it created in Tishrei? Was it created in Nisan? And Taisa goes through into that discussion to show that there's actually huge ramifications regarding the calendrical computations of the Ma'ilid and other things based on when exactly were the luminaries, the moon and the sun, made in the beginning of creation. So begin the current Daf Ches, 5 lines down at the top of the Yomid. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they say, not like a Tanakama. Ma'aseh Behema is not Echad Be'el, but rather it's Be'echad B'Tishrei, the first of Tishrei. So the Gemara goes through and tries to explain this machlekes of the Mishnah of Rabbi Meir saying Be'echad Be'el, Rabbi Shloimy saying Be'echad B'Tishrei. What's the sort of this machlekes? Some Rabbi Yochanan says like this. Interesting Gemara, because it's like trying to interpret a pasuk, an interesting pasuk. They're both actually learning out from the same pasuk. What is this pasuk? Shem, it's a pasuk in Tehillim. Pasuk is a little bit like a metaphorical, but Lavshu Karim Hatzayin. It's that the sheep, the flock of the sheep, is clothed. It has like clothing, meaning it's like as if it's wearing something. Vamokim and the valleys Yatfuvar are covered with the grain. Yisrael, they're making noise. Af Yeshua, they're even singing. Basically, it's all of the creation that's really in its full bounty. Now, Rabbi Meir said like this. He interprets the pasuk. When is it that the sheep are wearing clothing, so to speak? They're like mislabish, which Rashi explains means that they become pregnant. Taisa says that the Targum on that pasuk says that the males mount on the females, which is like a clean way of saying that they're mating one with the other. When is that they conceive and they become pregnant? That's lovshu karmatzayin. They're like expanding. They're wearing something. The sheep. Oh, that's what the pasuk is telling you. Read on. Bizman shamokum yatvuvar. That's when the grain is sprouting, and it's full with all this grain. That's the mokum is yatvuvar, and it's recognizable. Okay. So when is that? When are the animals becoming pregnant? Which is the time that you tell me the pasuk says that the valleys are full with all the grain. That's bi'adar. That's an adar. That's why by Nisan is when you take it all in. When's it in the field still? When it's all the grain is there in its full glory. That's adar. That means to say the animal is conceiving in adar. Oh, okay. Wait a second. If that's the case, it's misabris ba'adar. It conceives in adar. The yoldis ba'av. And because as the Gemara says in Bechayris, Daf Ches and Alf, that the gestation period of an animal, of behemadaka, of like sheep, of small livestock, which means that the pregnancy is for a period of 5 months. So therefore, if it's conceiving an Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. So it means it's giving birth in the month of Av. Oh, so Rosh Hashanah Shalem, that means to say the Rosh Hashanah of what? Of animals giving birth, which is what we're doing over here. We're taking every 10th animal and we're saying, okay, it's this year is going to be El. The reason for that is because right after the period of when it finishes is the new season for the new year. And since it gives birth in Av, so we're going to say that the Rosh Hashanah, says Rameir, is Rosh Chodesh El. Now, Rabbi Shloimy, they say a different interpretation. They read the pasuk, when do the sheep conceive, which is how we're interpreting these words, is Bizman Shi Yisrael, is when the stalks are making noise, and after Yeshua they're like singing a song. Now, when do the stalks sing a song? Is Benisan, meaning what? Benisan is the season when it's time for the harvest, because that's when the grain are in their stalks and the wind is blowing and they knock one on the other, so it's like making noise. It looks like they're singing a song. So that's in Nisan. So if that's the case, Misabes ben Nisan. That means that obviously the animals are conceiving in Nisan, the eldest Be'el. And we said it's 5 months later, so they're giving birth in Elul. So then the next month is then the new season, Rosh Hashanah Shalom Tishrei. Obviously the Rosh Hashanah is in Tishrei. So that's why we have this machlek, is when you're going to say Rosh Hashanah Ma'aseh Behema, depends when they conceive, because it's for a period of 5 months. And the month after it finishes its birth is going to be the new year. And this machlek is, how do you read the pasuk? Which one are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to the stalks? Meaning, how are we reading this? Are we comparing it to Yisro'o Af Yeshiru, which that's actually in Nisan time? Or are we comparing it to Amakom Yatvar part, which that's actually in Adar time? And that would just tell us when it's pregnant to this and say when it's conceived, when it's going to give birth. But then the Gemara asks on each man the Amar. V'idach nami, but Reb Meir also, Haksiv, but it says in the pasuk Yisro'o Af Yeshiru. Didn't you tell me that when is it singing its song, the stalks, and they're knocking and making all this noise? That's in Nisan. So how's he learning from Amakom Yatvar, which is when is the valley full with all the grain? When is its fullness? It's an Adar. Yeah, but what's with the other part of the pasuk? It seems to indicate when it's singing its song, when the winds are blowing and it's full in the stalks, the grain. That's in Nisan. Says the Gemara, no, he would tell you that part of the pasuk is Bafelta. It's talking about there are certain sheep that are late in mating up until Nisan. Where the Havim ben Nisan, that's in Nisan, but most of them mate and conceive from Adar. So yeah, the pasuk is telling you both of them. Pasuk is telling you that when is it Lavshu Karmatzam, when is it that the sheep are mating, is in Amokum Yatvuvar. That's in the month of Adar. And then you have Yisro'o Af Yeshiru, which is when the stalks are singing their song, which is Nisan. They'll mate then also. But those are the latecomers. But really, most of them are going to be in Adar, and therefore it makes sense that the Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema should be in Elul, because that's when the majority had already given birth already in Av. It says the Gemara, okay, what's with the other mandam also? We could ask on him also, according to him, that Rabbi Shimon, how could they say that they're conceiving in Nisan? Because it says in the pasuk Yisro'o Af Yeshiru. What do you mean? But it says Amakom Yatvavar also. When is the valley filled with the grain? That's in Adar time. And then the Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema should be Echad Be'el, not Echad Be'tishrei. It says those are the early bloomers, the Asin Ma'adar, where they conceive in Adar, but most of them conceive in Nisan. And therefore, we're going to compare it more to Yisro'o Af Yeshiru and not Amakom Yatvavar. And therefore, we're going to make the Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema on Echad Be'tishrei, not Echad Be'el. But then the Gemara says it's still difficult, because Bishlam, maybe one according to Rabbi, that he expounds the pasuk kedechsiv, like really like it's saying, love shu karmatzen. The pasuk is opening up by saying that the sheep are going to conceive, and what is the next words in the pasuk? At the time when the valley is filled with grain. When is that? That's Adar. That's why Reb Meir says that Ma'aseh Behema is 5 months later in Echad Be'el. And the Ikanami, now there is also a minority that are, as the pasuk continues, Yisro'o Af Yeshiru. That meaning that the sheep only conceive when the stalks are actually making noise and clapping one on the other, which is in Nisan. So that the pasuk makes sense. I'm telling you, the sheep are conceiving in Adar, when the stalks are full with grain, and then also some when it's Yisro'o Af Yeshiru, which is in Nisan. But I'm going to make Rosh Hashanah Echad Be'el, because that's when the majority already gave birth, and not Echad Be'tishrei, which is only for those late bloomers. But the Rabbi Shimon, that they say that actually the majority are conceiving in Nisan, and only minority in Adar. So the pasuk should have said the opposite. It should have said Lovshu Karm Hatzain. When do the sheep mate? Bisman Yisro'o Af Yeshiru. In Nisan time, when the stalks are full and they're banging one and the other with the winds, and then it's making this noise. It can not be that those also that are early bloomers, the Amokum Yatvavar, when the valleys are filled with the grain. But don't say that first, because that's the minority. Why would you say that first? You tell me the primary, the majority, is only in Nisan and some in Adar. So the Gemara actually falls off that pshat because of that. And Elam Rabba, rather Rabba gives a different interpretation. So the Kulam, according to everyone, you're right. Love shu karmatzayin, the sheep are mating bizman shamakum yatvavar. At the time when the valley is filled with the grain, when is that? That's ba'adar. So really, turns out, according to everyone, according to this new interpretation out of Rav, and not like Rabbi Yochanan said, is actually giving birth in Av. So the question obviously would be, it should be like Rameir. The Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh should be Ech B'El, because that's after they all gave birth. Why would Rabbi Shimon say Ech B'Tishrei? So he says, I'll tell you what the machlek is over here. The machlek is a very different source. Is in the pasuk in Devar. Pasuk says aser to aser. So the simple translation is tithe you shall surely tithe, but it's being redundant that you're saying it 2 times. So says the Gemara. B'shnei ma'aser hakasim adav. The pasuk are 2 types of tithes. What 2 types of ma'aser do you have? You have echad ma'aser behema. You have to give 10th of every new animal that's born. And you have echad ma'aser dagan. You have to give 10th of the grain that you have. Oh, so that hekesh of the 2 ma'ases is the machlekes in our Mishnah. What is this? So it's interesting how they each learned it in a different way. Meir Saber, he holds, ma'akesh ma'aser behema l'ma'aser dagan. You're going to compare the tithing of the animals to the tithing of the grain, which tells you what? Ma ma'aser dagan, just like the tithing of the grain, samuch legamrei isuroi, that close to the period that it finished is when you give ma'aser, because the Rosh Hashanah for ma'aser is when? Is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, as Gemara teaches later on the Beis and Alf in the Brisa. Now, Tishrei is right after the season of finishing your produce of your grain, because all summer long, the grain that you had harvested and reaped, you leave it out to dry in piles in the fields. So right after the summer season, we all know we're coming straight from the Bungla colony, straight into Rosh Hashanah, straight into the month of Tishrei. Right after the summer season is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. So it's Samach Legamrei, close to when you finally finished your production, is Isuri. You have to give your Ma'aser Dagan. Oh, so Av Ma'aser Behema. So to the tithing of the animal, Samach Legamrei, close to when it finishes. What do you have to finish? The animal doesn't need any harvesting and drawing. It's when it's born. When's it born? In Av. Oh, so right after it's finished is Isurui, is when you have to give it Ma'aser, which is Echad B'El. That's where Meir learns. But Rabbi Shimon said, they hold no. It's a different comparison. Makish Ma'aser Behema Ma'aser Dagan. Yeah. Compare the tithing of the animal to the tithing of the grain, but learn it this way. Ma Ma'aser Dagan, just like the tithing of the grain, Rosh Hashanah Shaloi is Tishrei. It's Rosh Hashanah is Tishrei. Av Ma'aser Behema Rosh Hashanah Shaloi Tishrei. So he's saying a different analysis. He's saying, just like there it's Tishrei, so Torah is going to be Tishrei. And that's machlekes our Mishnah is Rosh Hashanah Ma'aser Behema going to be Echad B'El, like Rameir says, or like Rabbi Shimon say Echad B'Tishrei. Now the Gemara continues to halacha the Mishnah. We said Echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah L'Shana. The first of Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah for the years. So the Gemara, what halacha are you talking about when you're saying it's the Rosh Hashanah for the years? So my puppy says it means l'shtaris. It means for the beginning of the years of the kings, which as we explained this in the first daf on the Beis and Alf. There's not like the Mishnah said the Shvius, that there's a significance to know when you're dating based on the kings, to know when the year starts, because if you predate a document, it's going to be invalid. If you post it, it's going to be valid. So we don't know when did the year start to know was it predated? Because I remember I saw them borrowing on Tishrei, and then I saw them in Kislev, and I don't know when did the year start. So we made a set date that, okay, the first of Tishrei is going to be the Rosh Hashanah for the kings, and you know that that's when it's the next year. Says Gemara, how can you say that? But not we learned in the Mishnah the opening halacha was be'echad ben Nisan Rosh Malachim. We said the first of Nisan, not Tishrei like we're discussing now, the Rosh Hashanah for the kings. Remember we said Lamayach. What do you mean Rosh Hashanah for kings? What does that mean? It said it means little stars for the documentation. So how can you say I'm going to tell me Rosh Hashanah for Shanim is Ishtaris, which is Echad B'Tishrei, when you already told me that Echad B'Nisan already is Rosh Hashanah for documentation for the kings. So the Molei not difficulty, as we already mentioned this idea in the previous daf. Kan over here, meaning the first halacha of our Mishnah is Lamalchi Yisrael. It's for the Jewish kings. Yeah, that's Rosh Hashanah for those documents is Echad B'Nisan. Kan over here, what we're discussing right now from our Mishnah, Echad B'Tishrei, when it's Rosh Hashanah Shanim, it's for Shtaris, is Lamalchi Umas Ha'olam, is for the non-Jewish kings. Jewish kings go on Nisan, non-Jewish kings go on Tishrei. The Gemara says, wait a second, if that's what the Mishnah means, then this that we had quoted from Rav Chizda on Daf Gimel Med Aleph, that he told us a very important qualification. If we had a halacha, the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah from Malachim is Nisan. He says, Rav Chizda jumps in. He says, wait, we didn't learn that the Rosh Hashanah is Nisan. Elamach Yisrael, only for the Jewish kings. But I just want you to know, for the non-Jewish kings, it's going to be Tishrei, meaning we count from Tishrei. Says the Gemara, Rav Chizda Sninas Lashminan. Chizda tells the halacha that the Mishnah itself says. You're telling me when it says that Echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, and you tell me what does that mean? It means for the non-Jewish kings. I don't need an Amoira to tell me, something the Mishnah itself is going to tell me. Says the Gemara, no, you're right. Rav Chizda wasn't coming to tell you Pshat in the Mishnah. He was coming to tell you Pshat in the Psukim. As we mentioned this in Daf Gimel and Aleph, that we had, in the words of Nechemi Mechachalia, we were confused about how to be able to translate what was the meaning that it was the months of the year. He was just coming to tell you that it dependent on a non-Jewish king is going to be on Tishrei. But for the Mishnah, you're right, he wasn't really teaching us anything. Or if anybody has another answer you could give to this question is actually that Rav Chizda, yes, he had to tell us in qualifying the halacha of Mishnah that by non-Jewish kings, the Rosh Hashanah is going to be Tishrei. You know why? Because it doesn't hold up the interpretation that Rav Papa just gave a moment ago, that he explained that what does it mean that Mishnah Rosh Hashanah is Echad B'Tishrei is for documentation. So therefore, our Mishnah never said this halacha, that Rosh Hashanah for Malchei Umas Olam is from Echad B'Tishrei. Because he doesn't interpret the word Lashanim like our Papa did. So Rav Chizda had to tell you that when we're telling you for documentation that you go based on the kings, it's going to be Echad B'Nissan, and all my Jewish kings, not my non-Jewish kings. Because actually, he actually explains when it says in the Mishnah that the first of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, he actually learned like Rabbi Zera, which is a different interpretation. Rabbi Zera, he says, what does it mean that Echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for the years? It means Litkufa. It actually means something very different. It actually means for the cycle, for the seasons of the sun and then the moon. To say that we count from when they were created, and regarding the consequential cycles of the seasons of the sun and the Moed Levana, as Taisus go through in detail, says there's huge ramifications of if it started in Nisan or started in Tishrei, to know they're half a year apart, to know which all these Berachas Hacham, all these different things go based on when and all the Moed Levana, which all these go based on the sun and the moon when it started. It has a huge ramification. That's what we're saying, that the Rosh Hashanah of the year, we mean to say regarding the constellations, that starts from Tishrei. That's what it means Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Lasi, and Rabbi Lasa. But then he says, but Tishrei Nibba Olam. That he says the world was created, and so too, as the Gemara tells later on in the Yom Beis, that for the sun and the moon, that he holds that it was created in Tishrei, not like those who hold it was in Nisan. That's what it means Rosh Hashanah. Not that of Shtaris. The halacha he was saying, which has halachic ramifications for the moilid and to know how to compute all these different things, that it starts on Tishrei. That's when it was created, not on Nisan.
Those the world was created.
Yeah. That we're going to see later on Daf Yomi. Now another interpretation, he says that when we say over here Rosh Hashanah, it means something else. It means what we classically call Rosh Hashanah, the Rosh Hashanah. It's Ladin. It's regarding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he judges in Tishrei as Kol B'Yeh Ha'olam, all those who come to the world. Everything that happens is going to happen to them until they come in Tishrei. As where do we find this? It says a passage in Devarim. It says that Einei Hashem lekecha ba, the eyes of Hashem, your God, are in it. From the beginning of the year until the end of the year, regarding all that is going to be decreed on it, which is from the beginning of the year, Hashem already judges what's going to be at the end of it. So, but says the Gemara, how do you know that this pasuk that says that Hashem judges from the beginning until the end of the year, that means the first of Tishrei, that you're tell me that the Rosh Hashanah of Shanim, it means regarding the beginning of the year judgment? Because the Chassidus says the pasuk in Tehillim, Teku v'achayde shofar, blast the shofar in the month, by Keser Liyom Chagenu, that's covered for the day of our holiday. Now, what does this mean? As the Gemara explains, what's the Yom Tov, as we continue to Medbeis, Shachayidish Meskasaboy, that the month, which really means like the Levana, which is where the month is based on, is covered in it. Which Rashi actually explains, what does it mean that the moon is covered? The first one explains why isn't he picking the moment itself? But he says that those who are far away, they don't see when the new month starts because the moon is concealed. For example, and we'll actually discuss this in greater detail in later dafim, where in the morning time, those in the west are not seeing the moon. And the reason for that is because at that point it's only visible in the east. So although it's not totally concealed from everyone, but those in the west cannot see the old Levana. And in the evening, those in the east cannot see the new moon, because it's very small right when it's starting, and therefore it's considered that there's what Yom Tov is there in the beginning of the month, which is the Chodesh is Meskasabay, that the moon is covered then. That's one pshat, as Rashi says. Ben Tam says actually the word Meskas actually means that mezuman. That's actually prepared. Rabbi Shloimy actually explains that what does it mean Chodesh Meskasabay? It means that because the Chattas of Rosh Chodesh is not sacrificed for Rosh Hashanah, so it's HaChodesh Meskasabay, that the korban of Rosh Chodesh actually covered, which Taisa discusses that and actually says, no, it's not that I didn't say there's no Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, it's just not mentioned in the Pasuk over here, and that's the whole discussion. Do you mention Movado Les Rosh Chodesh? Do you mention that in the Tefillah of Rosh Hashanah? But Akabanim, which month, which Yom Tov has it that it's basically trying to say on Rosh Chodesh, which is that the Chodesh is Meskas, that you don't see the korban, or you don't see the Levan itself. Havan is a Rosh Hashanah. That's Rosh Hashanah, which we know is on the 1st of Tishrei. And okay, Ksibin, it says afterwards, Kichakli, so because it's a statute for the Jewish people, Mishpit Lelke Yaakov, that is judgment for the God of Jacob, which we see that the 1st of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, it's Rosh Hashanah for Shanim, because it's for Din, that's when it's a Mishpit Lelke Yaakov. So that's how we see that it's Rosh Hashanah L'Shanim, meaning that with that we know the world is judged then. Now, continue on another interpretation on this pasuk. Come on, within the Brisa, it says in the pasuk Yichakli Yisrael, because a statute to the Jewish people who Mishpah L'Elkei Yaakov is judgment for the God of Yaakov. Now, Malamed comes to teach in Bezdin Shel Mala Nechnas Ladin, that the courts up in heaven, they don't enter to judge the people of the world. Only if the courts down here, the Jewish courts, first sanctify the month. So essentially what the pasuk is saying, if the Jewish people make the chak, ki chak li Yisrael, meaning if the Jewish people have that statute of making the new month, meaning they make the Kiddush HaChodesh, then there's going to be Mishpah L'Elkei Yaakov, then in Shemaim, then they're going to make a judgment, but they wait for the Jewish people to first go ahead and be Mekadosh the Chodesh. Another Brisa, a different interpretation. Ki chak li Yisrael, when it says that it's a chak for the Yisrael, Yisrael, I would only know that it's a time of judgment for the Jewish people. How do we know it's a time of judgment even for the nations of the world? As it says, Mishpah L'Elkei Yaakov, that is judgment for the L'Elkei Yaakov, not only for Yisrael, but it's judgment for the whole world. So what are you saying, Ki chak li Yisrael, if it's for everyone? So the pasuk first mentions Yisrael to say that the Jewish people, they entered the judgment first. Which like Rav Chizda, he says Melech B'tzibur, that if you have a king and the public, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is judging them, Melech Nechnas Tchila Din, the king, he goes into judgment first. Shenem, like says in the pasuk Malachim Aleph, Mishpat Avdai, the judgment of his servant, which is referring to Shlomo Melech, Mishpat Amei, the judgment of his people. First comes the king, then the people. Now, my time, what's the reason? Which same thing is over here. The Jewish people come first, then the nations of the world, where they're like the same equivalent of the Melech and the Tzibur. So even if you want, you could say the reason is Lav Orech Arla, make him a Malka Avroi. It's just not appropriate to have the king waiting in the waiting room out there till he gets judged, and then he goes first. Whatever that metaphor is. If you want, you could say no. It's you come late in the day, the doctor's he's already annoyed, or at 9 o'clock at night, he's already had a full day, he's already snapping at you already. So to speak, before there's the increase of the divine wrath because of all the sins of the Jewish people, the king goes first when it's like, okay, it's get a slap on the wrist, because he didn't have everyone coming and Chabdusketin and Chabyansketin and whatever, just that. So that's why, again, the Jewish people come first, and that's why the Melech comes first. Now we said that the 1st of Tishrei is a Rosh Hashanah for another thing. Another thing it's a Rosh Hashanah for is L'Shmita. The Shemitah year, which is every 7th year, that you don't go ahead and do work on the land, that halacha, it starts on the 1st of Tishrei. So how do we know that the Shemitah year is sanctified from Rosh Hashanah, that is going to be forbidden to work the land right then? Because the Pasuk says, it says, B'Shana Shviyas, the 7th year, Shabbos Shabbos Nilaret, should be total rest for the land. Now, B'Gam Shana Shana B'Tishrei, so it says the word that in the 7th year. And we learned that the word Shana from Tishrei, that's like it says in the Pasuk, Mirei Shana from the beginning of the year. Just like over there, we just mentioned this Pasuk means the 1st of Tishrei. So over here, it means Tishrei. Says the Gemara, and we had asked this in the reverse on the previous stuff. Maybe we learn that the word Shana says by Nisan, So here actually gives the same answer in the reverse. No, Danin Shana She'inim Chadashim. We're going to learn out when it mentions the word year without months. By Shemitah, the pasuk we bring over here doesn't mention the word Chadashim. It just says the Vashana Shvius. So we can learn that out Mishana She'inim Chadashim from when the terminology mentions year without months, which is by Tishrei. Main Danin Shana She'inim Chadashim. We're not going to learn out the law of Shemitah, which it says year without months. Mishana She'inim Chadashim. From when it mentioned by Nisan, it mentions year with months. So we're not going to learn that from Nisan. We're going to learn that from Tishrei. Next halacha we said was that we said that the first of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Ulu Yavalis. It's the beginning of the Yavel year. It says the Gemara, Yavalis, the Echem B'Tishrei, they really saw the Yavel starts the first of Tishrei Rosh Hashanah? What do you mean Yavel is B'Tishrei? Yavel starts on the 10th of Tishrei. There's still, he says the Pazim Yikra, which is the 50-year cycle, starts B'Yom HaKippurim Tavi Rishayf. It says on Yom Kippur, which is the 10th of Tishrei. Then you're going to make a Shayfa blast, and that's when Yavel's going to start. So how can you say it's the first of Tishrei? Says the Gemara, Hamani, who's the Tana by Mishnah, is Rabbi Shmuel ben Noshim Bechim Ambereki, which we mentioned them already before. So now, like learn the Brisa, it says the Pasuk in the Yikra. It says that you should sanctify the 50th year. The question is, Ma Tamalema. What's the Pasuk coming to teach us? Meaning, as Rashi explains the Gemara's question, is that you already said that Sheva Shabbos is Shanim. You have 7 cycles of 7 years, and then you have Avira Shofar, and then you're going to blow the Shofar in the B'Chodesh Hashvi. So I know that that's the 50th year because this is after the 49 years. What do you have to tell me that you can sanctify the 50th year? Oh, Lafishna, because it says in the pasuk by Yom Kippurim that you're going to blow the shofar in Yom Kippurim. So Yachal, you would think, and this is Rabbi Shmuel ben Noshim is coming to exclude from the Chacham. So Yachal, you would think, like that it should only be considered sanctified as Yovel from Yom Kippurim onwards. He says, no, that's the pasuk of the teacher. You should sanctify the 50th year, meaning, what do you mean? It's the whole year, that you sanctified from the beginning of that year, which starts in the first of Tishrei. He says that actually Yovel has 2 stages. You have Rosh Hashanah ad Yom Kippurim. What's from Rosh Hashanah, which he holds it really starts in Echad B'Tishrei. He's the Tana of our Mishnah that holds Yovel it starts Echad B'Tishrei. From Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippurim, v'aseres made tshuva, l'haya avodim neftar l'batein. So the slaves wouldn't go back yet to their homes because it says in the pasuk Tavir Shofar, which they blow the shofar in Yom Kippurim, and only afterwards, as I say, b'kuras and drawer, that you proclaim freedom, which is what on the Liberty Bell, and only then do the slaves go free. So they didn't go home yet. But v'lo misham la the name. Neither were they enslaved to their masters because it already says ukedash l'shnat chamishim. Like we said, it already starts when Rosh Hashanah starts at the beginning of the 50th year that the halachas already start. So Ella, rather they're in this like quasi state. Oichlin v'sheisin v'smeichim, they eat and they drink and they rejoice. After saying but ashamed, they have their crowns on their heads, meaning if they want to put like a crown on their head to show that they're free, they could do that too. And Kivin Shigin Yom Kippurim, once they reach Yom Kippurim, Taku Bezdin B'Sheva, then the Bezdin blows on the shofar, and Niftaru Avodim L'Bateim, the slaves go home to their homes, and Besadis Chayz L'Balein, and the fields go back to their owners. But again, that's like the halach of our Mishnah that we see, like Rabbi Shmuel ben Noshim Bechim Ambereki, that the Rosh Hashanah for Yovel starts on Rosh Hashanah. Now, V'Rabbanan, that they actually, that pasuk that they don't use to tell you that it starts on Rosh Hashanah. So what do they do with the pasuk of a Kedash Mashnas Chamishim? It's not in the beginning of the year. They learn something else from that pasuk. They come to tell you Shanim Atam Mekadosh, that when the Yovel year starts, there's a mitzvah on the courts to say Mukudeshes. The year is sanctified. And that's what, if you read the simple translation of the pasuk, it sounds like the Chacham. You should sanctify it. Now, they don't hold it starts on Rosh Hashanah. They hold that the laws of Yovel start on Yom Kippurim, but it's just telling you the years you sanctify, and what's it coming to tell us? It's coming to tell you that you don't sanctify the months. Meaning, this is really like Rabbi Elazar Shimon that we're going to see in the second paragraph of Chavdal Amud Aleph. He holds whether the moon was seen in its time or wasn't seen in its time doesn't make a difference. Meaning, usually if you say if it was seen, so then the witnesses. If it wasn't seen, so you need the courts to proclaim it. He says no, it doesn't make a difference. The courts never are makadosh l'chaydish, and the source says Rashi is from here that shanim at makadosh is makadosh chadash. You're not. There's no kiddush l'chaydish. They don't say this day is going to be sanctified. That's what the pasuk want to teach you. Now, related to this machlekes, Tanya Idach learned another brisa which is like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Pasuk says Rabbi Yikra. It says that Yovel that it is Yovel. Now, what does it come and tell us when it says it is Yovel? Well, it sounds like unnecessary. So it says the Brayso Lefi Shneimah, because it says in the pasuk V'Kadash Shnas HaChamishim, you should sanctify the 50th year, which we learn out from there, as we said according to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, that you sanctified from the beginning of the year. Now, Yachol, you would think, and this is what the pasuk is coming to exclude, you would think that just like that you go ahead and you sanctify and you started from the beginning the halachas of Yovel, so too you go ahead and you sanctify it at the end. Meaning, just like you said, that although really Yovel starts in Yom Kippurim, but you already start on Rosh Hashanah, like the sanctification procedures, so too you would think at the end of Yovel, after Rosh Hashanah, when it's already the next year, you should extend it until Yom Kippurim. And says the Brayso, and don't wonder that how's it possible that we're going to keep a little of the Yovel 10 days into the next year. We know the B'risa Halacha, as the Gemara is going to say later on the Sugya, that you do add on sanctity from a sanctified time onto the mundane timing that comes before and after it. So maybe you would think to say that just like Yovel really is starting from Yom Kippurim, but you're already sanctified 10 days before for Rosh Hashanah, so too you would extend it after into the next year, then it would also go 10 days into Yom Kippurim. Tamalema has to come to teach you Yovel he. When it says it is Yovel, it's like a mute, it's excluding, saying, oh, this is Yovel, which tells me Shnas HaChamishim, the 50th year, which is Shnas HaChamishim, but Makadosh, you're only going to sanctify the 50th year, V'yat Makadosh Shnas HaChamishim, you're not going to sanctify the 51st year. Now, as the Gemara continues to have a Testament Aleph, for Rabbanan, that they don't learn out from V'kidashtem, that, like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, that you should sanctify it from the beginning of the year, from Rosh Hashanah. They hold Yovel only starts from Yom Kippurim, and obviously then you don't need Yovel he to exclude the Seifa, the next year going 10 days in, because the whole reason you thought you would have gone 10 days into the next year was because you went 10 days into the beginning of this year, but they don't have that, because they don't hold the Kadash Mashal Commission to come to teach you that you sanctified 10 days early to say that you would think you did 10 days late. So according to the Rabbanan, what do they expound from Yovel he? You don't need Yovel he to exclude, oh, I'm not going to extend 10 days later. What do you mean 10 days later? Don't do 10 days earlier to say that you did that 10 days later. They actually learn there's two different interpretations of what they learn from this. Either Shnas Chamishim Atamayna, they tell you that you only count it as the 50th year, and you don't count the Yovel year as the 50th year for the end of the Yovel cycle that you just had, and Shnas Chamishim Ba'achas, and you would think to say that you would count it as the 51st year, meaning as year number 1 of the incoming Yovel cycle. No, you don't. You don't count the 50th year as the coming first year of the coming year. Rather, the next year after Yovel is going to be the first year. Why would I think otherwise? Because it's actually coming to exclude from Yehuda. Because the Amar that he says in Masechet Nedarim, Shnas Chamishim Oy Lekan Ulekan. He says that the 50th year actually is counted as the Yovel year, and it's actually the first year of the next Shemitah cycle. If you think about it, it's always 7-year cycles. So you go 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. When you come to Yovel, really it's the first year of the next Shemitah cycle. So he holds that actually it's counted as the Yovel year, and it's also counted as the first year of the next cycle. Kamash Malan Delay, that's what the Rabbanan say. We learn that from this pasuk. Gibel he to say, no, this is Yovel, and it's only the 50th year, and it's not the 51st year. That's what they learn out from it. Whereas Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he learns, as this Brayso says, that to tell you that although I tell you that in the beginning of the year you're making it earlier, you're Ma'asav Chol Al Kodesh by although really Yovel starts on the 10th when they blow the shofar, you're going to start already sanctifying it ready from Rosh Hashanah. You're not going to do that going into the next year, 10 days. That's what you learn from Yovel he to exclude that. Thank you to anytime. Thanks.